seagrass or หญ้าทะเล in Thai is the only flowering plant that can grow underwater.
ලොව තුළ පවතින තෙවන වැදගත්ම පරිසර පද්ධතිය ලෙස හඳුන්වන මෙය විවිධාකාර පාරිසරික සේවාවන් රැසක් සලසා දෙනු ලබනවා.
Seagrass acts as a nursery for young fish and shellfish, provides foods and shelter for a variety of species underwater.
මෙම පරිසර පද්ධති තුළ ඩියුගෝන් හෙවත් මුහුදු ඌරන්, මුහුදු අශ්වයන් සහ කොළකෙස්බෑවන් වැනි දුර්ලභ තර්ජනයට පත් විශේෂ දක්නට ලැබීම ඉතා වැදගත් කාරණයක්.
ความสำคัญของระบบนิเวศหญ้าทะเลเลยก็คือเป็นพื้นที่สำคัญในการกักเก็บคาร์บอนซึ่งเป็นบลูคาร์บอนที่สำคัญของประเทศไทยเลย
They also help maintain water quality and store carbon.
දේශගුණ විපර්යාස වලින් මානවයා ආරක්ෂා කරමින්ද ගෝලීය උෂ්ණත්වය පාලනයට දායක වෙමින්ද මුහුදු තෘණ ලෝකයට කරන්නා වූ සේවය අති මහත්ය.
The main threats to seagrass meadow include industrial, agricultural runoff, both activities, and climate change.
Firstly, seagrass is threatened by coastal development, navigation, and water traffic.
We can prevent the decline of seagrass by being careful with the use of chemical fertilizer and sewage discharge into the sea.
මෙවැනි සුවිශේෂී පරිසර පද්ධතියක් හායනයට ලක්වීම වළක්වා ගනිමින් සංරක්ෂණයටත් ප්‍රතිෂ්ඨාපනයටත් පියවර ගැනීම අපගේ වගකීමක්.
We should have the policy to conserve the seagrass and ban the fishing in the protected area.
මං වගේම අනාගත පරම්පරාව නියෝජනය කරන ඔබගේ දුවාදරුවනුත් වෙනුවෙන් මෙම පරිසර පද්ධතිය සංරක්ෂණය කරන්නට ඔබගේ දායකත්වය ලබා දෙන මෙන් අද ලෝක මුහුදු තෘණ දින සැමරෙන මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මම ඔබගෙන් ඉතා ආදරයෙන් සහ ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
And that is why we should protect seagrasses.
With that inspiring message from our teenagers, let us begin today's program. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. But in Sri Lankan style, let me say Ayubowan. Let me warmly welcome all of you on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka to the United Nations in New York for the first celebration of World Seagrass Day. As you would recall, last year, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 76/265, sponsored by Sri Lanka and joined by 24 other co-sponsors to declare March 1st as World Seagrass Day. We are joined today by Ms. Ligia Norona, the Assistant Secretary General and Head of New York Office of the United Nations Environment Program, as well as Dr. Maria Potruglu from the World Seagrass Association. Let us begin today's commemoration with a welcome address by His Excellency Mohan Piris, Permanent Representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Good morning to each and every one of you. We are delighted to be with you this morning. Thank you for joining us on this virtual platform to celebrate the first anniversary of the declaration of March 1st as World Seagrass Day. Excellencies, distinguished guests, we are delighted to have you with us this morning, notwithstanding your busy schedules. We are also pleased to have the privilege of having with us the head of UNEP in New York and a renowned scientist from the World Seagrass Association. My dear friends, this day follows the adoption by consensus, the General Assembly resolution on World Seagrass Day. It ties up with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. You might be asking yourself the question as to why we need an international day to mark this beautiful creation of nature. My dear friends, international days are occasions to sensitize and inform the community on issues of public concern, to mobilize political will and resources to address global problems and to celebrate and reminisce over the past achievements of humanity. You will appreciate that climate change today is a challenge faced by all of us. It's no secret. A challenge which, if not overcome by our collective endeavors, will endanger the very existence of the human race and all living beings on this planet. You will agree that we are reaching a stage in which the debates on sustainable development, human rights, peace and security, and such other important topics that we focus on in the United Nations could well be relegated to a position of least importance with the occurrence of one catastrophic event caused by climate change, as we saw it just a few weeks ago. Sri Lanka's commitment, therefore, to make its tangible contribution to mitigate climate change is manifest when Sri Lanka provided leadership to the UN Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management in 2019, addressing a major cause for biodiversity loss and habitat destruction. Sri Lanka also leads the Commonwealth Action Group on mangrove restoration. It is therefore our hope that this endeavor on seagrass, with its great carbon sequestration potential, will make a significant contribution to climate mitigation measures worldwide. My dear friends, with the record loss of seagrass due to human activity, raising public awareness on the importance of seagrass is crucial to promoting biodiversity and promote the dialogue regarding the preservation of seagrass meadows. Climate change, as you know, is a threat to marine biodiversity and ecosystem health. Sri Lanka, as an island nation, is well aware of the importance of a healthy nation, of a healthy ocean, and the vital role played by seagrass in this vast ecosystem of ours. We must appreciate that saving seagrass means saving our seas, as these areas host a myriad of animal species, including supplying 20% of the world's fisheries, sequestration of up to 18% of the world's oceanic carbon, supporting communities by providing livelihood, and more. Saving seagrass is also a positive contribution, as you will appreciate, to climate change adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction. Adopting measures to protect them, therefore, contributes to the achievement of the goals of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. The United Nations General Assembly resolution, therefore, has attracted global interest, with many countries and communities being sensitized to the importance of this vital ecosystem. This day of global recognition, therefore, and the support of outreach activities such as this is the first crucial step towards driving home the importance of seagrass into the collective consciousness of the peoples of the world. My dear friends, it is therefore being considered, if I was to say, a sacred duty that we owe Mother Earth, our only home, that Sri Lanka took the lead at the United Nations Organization in engaging with member states to have this resolution adopted and passed. It is therefore only fitting, I say, that I should seize upon this opportunity to thank in particular the 24 co-sponsors who joined hands with us to translate this initiative to a living document that would strengthen our hand in our endeavors to combat climate change. Permit me, therefore, to make a loud call to our global family to celebrate this day dedicated to the preservation of a beautiful living species in our seagrass meadows that nature has blessed us with as a means to ensuring that we live in harmony with our planet, which is our only home. Let's remind ourselves of the fact, my dear friends, that we have only one Earth and just one planet. Let me conclude with a simple but touching poem by one of our youth. It's titled The Voice of the Seagrass Meadows by a schoolgirl in the Seychelles, Tara Michel, who is an environmentalist and who has been in the meadows beneath the seas with this plea. The Voice of the Seagrass Meadows. The ugly duckling of the marine world, scientists lovingly call me, an ecosystem on the decline. My legacy, though, is to sustain life of our precious underwater world. Please don't let me die. The ocean nursery for all, a climate change fighter. I clean, I protect, I stabilize. In my habitats, I feed all. A protector day in, day out. Please don't let me die. Everlasting purifier, your carbon I swallow. I am the enemy of erosion. I am the perfect buffer, protector of the vulnerable. Please don't let me die. Listen to my whispers, speaking of the wonders, the timeless cleaning, the everlasting protecting of your world under the sea. Please don't let me die. What a lovely plea in those poetic words. I leave you with those thoughts and ask you to join with all of us to celebrating this day and making the world a safer and better place to live in. I wish you all a very great day and a great day for seagrass. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for your warm words of welcome to all those who have joined us here, as well as outlining the importance of this day. Next, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Ligia Norona, Assistant Secretary General and Head of the New York office of UNEP. Ms. Ligia Norona began her role as United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Head of the New York office at UNEP on 1st April 2021. She's an economist with over 30 years of international experience in the field of sustainable development. Ms. Norona previously served as Director of UNEP's Economy Division based in Paris and Nairobi, leading UNEP's work on climate mitigation and energy transitions, on inclusive green economies, circularity, and sustainable consumption and production, as well as on trade and sustainable finance, on extractives and the nexus of environment, pollution, and health. During her tenure, Ms. Norona positioned the Economy Division as a center for integrated actions in support of the 2030 Agenda. Prior to joining UNEP, Ms. Norona worked as Executive Director at the Energy and Resources Institute in New Delhi. She also served as Secretary of the Asian Energy Institute and as Coordinator of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Partnerships, and worked with the International Development Research Center in Canada. She holds a master's degree in economics from the University of Mumbai, as well as a master's degree in Sea Use Law, Economics and Policy, and a PhD from the London School of Economics. So she's ideally suited to speak on this occasion. You have the floor, Excellency. Warm words of welcome from the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for those really kind words, and I'm delighted to be here. Ambassador Pires, Excellencies, and distinguished colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am absolutely delighted to be here to this first celebration of the World Seagrass Day, declared by the UN General Assembly last year, following a resolution by Sri Lanka and the 24 co-sponsors. It is absolutely wonderful that we have this day for an ecosystem that is so important to our well-being. And I thank Ambassador Pires for sharing those wonderful words, and that absolutely thoughtful poem that we heard, which really is very touching. This resolution, ladies and gentlemen, helps raise awareness about the importance of the conservation of seagrass in marine environments and on the crucial role of seagrass in the context of life below water, which is what you just heard from Ambassador Pires, a role which is not sufficiently acknowledged or even understood. At the United Nations Environment Programme, we strongly advocate for the protection of all ecosystems for the well-being of people and the planet. And seagrass is one of the most valuable marine ecosystems on Earth, as you just heard from the wonderful video in the beginning of this session. The video, which speaks to the voices of youth from across the world. And it's really, really good that we are already engaging with the youth, because they are the ones who will inherit this earth, this one earth that we have, as Ambassador Pires put it. Shortly, you will hear from Dr. Maria Portugulo from the World Seagrass Association on the topic of seagrass and climate change mitigation. At UNEP, we had the pleasure of having Dr. Portugulo as a lead author of our 2020 publication, Out of the Blue, the Value of Seagrasses to the Environment and the People. The scientific data of the publication resonated globally, and we at UNEP are very proud to have contributed to raising awareness on seagrass. As per the Out of the Blue report, seagrass covers more than 300,000 square kilometers in 159 countries and 6 continents, from the tropics to the Arctic Circle. And it's one of the most diverse and valuable marine ecosystems. Ladies and gentlemen, seagrass plays a crucial role, as you heard from Ambassador Pires, in combating climate change, ensuring food security, protecting our coastlines, enriching biodiversity, controlling disease, and filtering water. Seagrass meadows are a hugely effective nature-based solution to climate change. They are also home to fisheries, as you heard in the video, that not only provide food and livelihoods to coastal residents, but help increase ocean biodiversity. Regrettably, climate change, along with increasing coastal populations and industrial activity and unregulated fishing, have all contributed to the decline of seagrass, as you will hear soon from the doctor. Saving seagrass, friends, is a matter of survival for species such as turtles, manatees, and dugongs. If seagrass perishes, so too will these animals, and that will tragically affect all intertwined habitats and life on Earth as we understand it. The message is clear. We need to act now to protect seagrasses by prioritizing timely, ambitious, and coordinated actions in the areas of conservation, sustainable management, and restoration aligned with the global biodiversity framework. And this year is the year to act as agents of change in this realm and beyond. The SDG Summit is only 6 months away, and the preparations for the Summit of the Future are in full gear. And the important message here is that these interconnections of ecosystems are really important to help deliver on the SDGs. And the more we make these interconnections, the more we protect ourselves and the development opportunities for the future. In a few days, many of us will be at the 5th United Nations Conference on the Least Developed Countries in Doha. And this is also an important event that will connect with all of these important discussions that are being held. Today, let us use the World Seagrass Day to remember how we are all interconnected and that we are all part of the same ecosystem, part of this one Earth that Ambassador Pires reminds us all. Thank you so very much for inviting me, and have a great day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for the inspiring remarks and for the role that you continue to play in integrating the environmental dimension in United Nations programs. Now it is my pleasure to welcome the highlight of today's commemoration. We have here with us, as the Assistant Secretary General very kindly mentioned, Dr. Maria Portugulo of the World Seagrass Association, who will speak on the topic, role of seagrass in mitigating climate change, which incidentally is the very reason that Sri Lanka took the initiative to have a UN General Assembly resolution declaring World Seagrass Day, and the very reason that we are here today. Dr. Maria Portugulo is a biologist by background whose work has focused on understanding the effects of climate change on marine and coastal ecosystems. Over the last 15 years, she has conducted multidisciplinary research on seagrasses in Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. In 2020, she led the first ever global seagrass report, Out of the Blue, the value of seagrasses to the environment and to people, initiated by UNEP, acting as editor-in-chief and coordinating a collaborative effort of over 60 seagrass experts from across the globe. Maria is currently a senior scientist at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs of the UK. Today, she is representing the World Seagrass Association, established in 2000, which includes scientists from over 20 countries who collectively spearhead efforts to heighten global awareness on seagrasses. Dr. Maria, you have the floor. Most welcome.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Ambassador. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I will try to share my screen. I have prepared a short presentation for you. So let me share my screen. Can you all see it?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. So my name is Maria Potoroglu, and on behalf of the World Seagrass Association, I want to tell you how honored I am for this invitation by the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka to the United Nations, and for being here with you today. I want to express my gratitude to all of the staff there in New York and back home in Sri Lanka. Madam Hasanthi Disanayake, Mr. Susantha Udakitara, and Mr. Gunaratna, you all deserve a special mention for being the backbone of this and for all your efforts in pushing this up to today. Thank you so much. So without further ado, this is an auspicious occasion to come together today and celebrate the World Seagrass Day. So seagrasses have been described as the lungs of our ocean, but they're admittedly an overlooked part of our seas. So when most people like yourselves think of marine ecosystems, they usually think of mangrove forests and coral reefs, but I'm telling you, there's more beneath the surface. So I'm here today to hopefully change this and tell you why seagrasses are important to all of us, and hopefully get one step closer to giving these ecosystems the recognition they deserve. But before I dive into today's presentation, I remember I did that last time we met for supporting the resolution, but I would like to take us all together to a quick virtual dive in a seagrass meadow. So I hope this will give the chance to those of you who have never seen or snorkeled around the seagrass to experience this wonderful ecosystem that exists in our seas. So what is actually seagrass? So let's start from what it isn't. So despite its name, seagrasses are not true grasses. So most of the species of seagrasses look like grasses, and the species you might have seen around have long, narrow leaves and grow in meadows, but seagrasses can come in different shapes. The leaves can be oblong, they can be oval or fan-like. They can also have different lengths. Some of the leaves can be as small as your fingernail. Some other species can have leaves that can be as long as 7 meters. And seagrasses is often confused with seaweed, but they do differ in the way they look, the way they reproduce, the way they transport and exchange nutrients, and everything else that has to do with the surrounding environment. And seagrasses are actually flowering plants that have evolved to live in the sea. So let's take a closer look of what seagrasses are. So seagrasses evolved from life in the ocean to the land and back to the sea about 100 million years ago. So this is well before we were dominating this planet and when dinosaurs existed around. So this land to sea evolution is what makes them the only true plants found in the ocean. And in fact, seagrasses' closest relatives are the lilies and orchids. So seagrasses produce flowers that have seeds and pollen, and instead of having bees and other insects that do the pollination on land, crabs and shrimps can play this role in the pollination. So seagrasses are also a very cosmopolitan group. They're found almost everywhere, and it's something we will see in the next slide. And there's more than 70 species worldwide. So seagrasses are found in shallow waters in many parts of the world, from the tropics up to the Arctic Circle. And the distribution, as you can see in this slide, is very extensive. That this map of seagrass records actually reveals almost the entire global coastline. So the missing or white areas that you see here do not necessarily mean that these are locations that seagrasses don't exist, but these are mostly areas that have been unexplored even today. So as the ambassador mentioned in his opening remarks, seagrass exists in 159 countries on 6 continents, making them one of the most widespread coastal habitats on our planet. And not all of the places with seagrasses look the same. You will have the chance to see many photos during this presentation, so hopefully you will get an understanding of how variable this ecosystem can be in different places. So seagrasses have split the world into what we call seagrass bioregions that are based on the species distribution, the species range, and the climatic conditions. So 6 bioregions have been identified, 4 in temperate and 2 in tropical areas. And as I mentioned to you before, there are more than 70 species of seagrasses globally. And while most of the coastal regions can be dominated by 1 or a few species, regions in the tropical waters, especially in the Indian and Western Pacific Oceans, can have the highest seagrass diversity. And in those places, you can find as many as 14 species growing together. So seagrasses form extensive underwater meadows that create highly productive and rich in biodiversity and life habitats. So more than 1 billion of people live within 100 kilometers from a seagrass meadow. And these people rely on the goods and the benefits that are provided by seagrasses. So seagrass experts around the world, they have tried to explore these services and the benefits. Either this is for fisheries, water filtration, biodiversity, or the value that seagrasses can have to our cultures and the opportunities that they offer to any tourism or any recreational activities. So in terms of fisheries, seagrasses support about 20% of the world's biggest fisheries, which can have a total value of at least 2 million euros per year in the Mediterranean alone. And when it comes to the species that they host and the habitats, seagrasses provide food and shelter to thousands of plants and animals. And this includes endangered and charismatic species such as dugongs and manatees, seahorses, sea turtles, and many others. Seagrass can also improve water quality by filtering and cycling the nutrients. And in many places around the world, they have tried to estimate this value. So in the US, for example, this is 34,000 approximately per hectare per year. And this figure is greater than many terrestrial and marine habitats. Seagrasses also remove pollutants from the water, so behaving something like natural filters. And in doing so, they can reduce any humans, animals, and ecosystems exposure to bacterial pathogens. And in some cases, it has been found that these can be reduced up to 50%. So I'm going to zoom you out for a moment and reply to a big question for all of us around ecosystem services. And this is the carbon question and the role that seagrasses can play in mitigating climate change. So what is happening to the nearly 10 gigatons of carbon that reach the atmosphere from our activities every year? So we all know the problem that this is causing and the problems that this will cause in the future. But one of the very interesting facts about this carbon pollution is that 57% of it disappears. Well, it doesn't exactly disappear. It's taken up by natural ecosystems. So if it wasn't for these natural ecosystems doing something without carbon, the climate change would be happening more than twice as fast. So 2.6 gigatons of this initial 10 gigatons roughly goes into terrestrial ecosystems. And this carbon is taken up by forests. But the rest of that 57% goes into the oceans. So over the history of anthropogenic climate change, the oceans have been the major natural sink for carbon dioxide. So now most of the carbon is going into the surface waters, and it can stay there for hundreds of years. But some of the rest is going into a longer term sink, and it's kept there for millennia. So seagrasses, together with salt marshes and mangroves, are responsible for capturing up to 70% of the organic carbon in the marine environment, which makes them one of the most intense sinks on the planet. And for this reason, seagrasses are considered one of the most powerful solutions we have as humans to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And this is exactly the reason why they tackle the two main R's that we need to look as different ways to combat climate change. One is the regulation, and the other is the resilience. So by regulation, we mean the actions that we can take to permanently eliminate or reduce the long-term risk and hazards of climate change. So seagrasses can act as large carbon sinks. So conserving the sink capacity of these systems can be a major player in capturing and storing the carbon that we emit into the atmosphere. But they do not only mitigate the climate change, they can help us adapt to the impacts of climate change that make us more resilient to any changes we see now or we will see in the future. So seagrasses have the ability to adjust to climate change, to moderate any potential damage, to take advantage of opportunities, and to cope with any negative consequences. So they protect the coast from erosion, they protect us from storm surges, and they slow down the wave energy. And these two ecosystem services are closely linked and depend on each other. So carbon storage won't happen if we lose seagrass, or if seagrasses lose their ability to adapt to sea level rise. And they all depend on our activities, not only what we do in the sea, but also on land. So more specifically, seagrasses, as the ambassador said in his opening remarks, can sequester up to 18% of the world's oceanic carbon. They store twice as much carbon as terrestrial forests, and they do that up to 35 times faster than terrestrial forests. And they do not only capture the carbon in such big quantities and at a quick rate, but they can also store it in the sediments for thousands of years. So this means that the carbon is locked away for a very, very long time. And as I mentioned, seagrasses also tackle the impacts that we see from climate change. So they protect the coastline from erosion by reducing the wave energy hitting the coast by around 40%. They can elevate the ocean floor by 30 meters per year when this is compared with areas without seagrass, and they can buffer the ocean acidification. And we know how detrimental this service is for calcifying organisms like any animals with shells or coral reefs. So I'm not sure if any of you has seen a carbon sink, but hopefully the next slide will give you an idea. So a carbon sink looks exactly like this. So actually, most of it is carbon. So seagrasses collect organic material that's coming down from the rivers, material that's coming in from the sea, and material that is produced by the plants themselves. So if we take a closer look of what is happening above and below these meadows, you get a picture like this. So a few tons of carbon sit on the top as above ground biomass, as we call it. And this is essentially the plant itself. But below the meadow, the amount of carbon we find is enormous. So I'm just going to use another example from the Mediterranean, because there we have found that seagrasses that sit on the top of around 11 meters of carbon. This is a very, very big area. And we think that this carbon has been accumulated by seagrasses in the same place for probably thousands of years. So now let's just take a closer look on how many different carbon stocks we have in a seagrass ecosystem. So as plants, seagrasses photosynthesize. So this is when they absorb the carbon dioxide and turn it into biomass. So as I said, this is essentially the part of the plant. So the leaves that we see on the top and the roots and the rhizomes that we don't usually see, but they are part of the sediment. So now there's lots of carbon that's coming down from the rivers and comes in from other ecosystems in the sea, like mangroves, like seaweed. So seagrasses have the ability to trap this material within their area. So just think of them as a living filter in a way. Also, seagrasses create a whole habitat where other plants and animals can use for food and shelter. And they also contribute more carbon that eventually gets locked in those areas by seagrasses. And we know that seagrasses can regulate the climate. But what we don't know sometimes is what is the value of this service and who benefits from this. So in the recent years, there's been lots of maps of carbon sequestration and storage capacity of seagrasses, but usually the beneficiaries of these services are not often specified or mapped. And of course, if you think about it, like as a first high-level approach, the beneficiaries of this service are the global population, because when you regulate the climate, this is a global benefit. But I will take you to a tropical environment now and try to illustrate this global benefit from the example of Kenya. So a few years ago, we took a deep dive into the carbon storage capacity of seagrasses in Gazi Bay, which is in the southern coast of Kenya. So seagrass in the area cover around 7 kilometers squared that are found at the center of the bay, and they have a total carbon stock of around 600,000 megagrams. This is a little bit too technical, but I will get to the point of it. So then we followed the extra local approach for determining the economic value of the service, which is based on the social cost of carbon for different regions across the world. So the social cost of carbon, what we mean by that, actually it denotes the value of avoided damages as a result of a unit reduction of carbon dioxide or other emissions. So this resulted the value of those seagrasses in Kenya, an economic value of $19 million, which, as you can see on the map on the right-hand side, with the global map with all the countries, this value is unevenly distributed. So while the seagrass meadow is the supplier of this service, and the Kenyan people you would expect to be the only beneficiaries, they are not. China, Europe, and the US are the main beneficiaries of this service. And it shows that seagrass meadows in a specific part of the world have extra local benefits, as we call them, for people that are in geographically disconnected regions. And then we thought we can go beyond carbon and we can look at another example. So what is happening in the case of fisheries? So I will now take you in a temperate environment in the North Atlantic region, where seagrasses are important contributors to stocks of Atlantic cod. So the juvenile Atlantic cod are normally found in high density in locations with seagrasses, where the growth and survival can be enhanced, which then increases the chances to reach the adult stage. So in theory and in practice, the seagrass meadow acts as a nursery habitat. So evidence from this indicates that these juvenile fish, they actively choose seagrass as their habitat. So in this area, this region, the North Atlantic, the juvenile cod have been recorded in these shallow waters along both the eastern and the western coasts. And these waters also comprise the two major fishing areas where fleets from local but also foreign countries operate. And most of the catch, around 81%, comes from Iceland, Norway, and the Russian Federation. But when we looked at the supply chain of these fisheries, we realized that the beneficiaries are not only the people from the countries where seagrasses act as a habitat for the juvenile cod, but also from countries that they import part of these landings. So after the Atlantic cod is shipped and processed, for example, when you dry it and salt it, it is distributed to many other countries throughout Europe, as we expected, but it also ended up in China, Brazil, and Nigeria. So with this example, we can see now that the benefits provided by seagrasses, either this is for nutritional or economic value, they flow beyond the local boundaries. But unfortunately, we know that our activities have an impact on seagrasses. So multiple pressures from coastal development, industrial and agricultural runoff, and climate change are responsible for the degradation. And in some of the cases, we see losses of seagrass meadows. So seagrass have been declining since the 1930s, and we are currently losing them in some cases at a rate as high as 7% per year. So this is equivalent to losing a football field size of a seagrass meadow every 30 minutes. And as you can see on the graph on the right-hand side of the non-distribution of seagrasses, only 25% occurs within marine protected areas. When we compare this to warm water coral reefs and mangroves, more of those ecosystems are placed within MPAs, which makes the seagrasses the least protected marine ecosystem. And this becomes a little bit worse when we look at what is happening in each bioregion. So this level of protection or non-protection does not distribute evenly among the different seagrass bioregions. So only 17%, for example, of seagrasses occur within MPAs in the tropical Indo-Pacific bioregion. And if we remember from the map I showed you earlier, this is one of the hotspots of seagrass species diversity that we might be losing every year that passes. But it's not all gloom. We have many solutions and paths that we can take to protect them. So the establishment of national determined contributions provide a forum for each nation to outline the steps that they can take to achieve their emissions reductions. And this is an analysis we ran back in September 2019 as we're getting ready for the Out of the Blue publication. So at that time, we found that 64 countries had included the reference to coastal and marine ecosystems in terms of mitigation and adaptation. And of these 64 countries, only 10 countries included an explicit reference to seagrasses, with some of them referring to adaptation and some of them to mitigation. Today, after the countries have submitted their revised NDCs, we now see an additional 6 parties that have made an explicit reference to seagrasses, taking this grand total to 16 countries. Well, this is an amazing first step. And now what we need to see is the rest of these 159 countries to follow this example. But we also see that seagrasses can support the progress towards most of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the ones the ones that refer to the delivery of targets that relate to climate change and food security. So in an analysis we conducted a few years ago, we found that by protecting and restoring seagrass meadows, countries can achieve at least 26 targets, and they're indicators that associate with 10 goals. So this is the same case for many of the targets within the Global Biodiversity Framework. And many of these biodiversity goals, in particular those that address the habitat loss, the fish stocks, the climate security, they all point out to benefits that can be delivered by healthy seagrasses. And also both of the United Nations decades on ecosystem restoration and on ocean science provide excellent opportunities to draw the focus on the benefits that we can derive through the protection and the restoration of seagrasses. And to achieve these decade-related goals, we all have the opportunity to include seagrasses in our country commitments and actions, but only if we know what we have in our backyard. And we know that healthy seagrasses provide a wealth of opportunities, as we said, to mitigate climate change, to adapt to future changes, and to build resilience. And there are many steps that we can take that span across policy, science, and financing. And as an international community, we could act now to protect these valuable ecosystems, not tomorrow. And we can integrate seagrasses into the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework, of the NDCs, and the Paris Agreement, and the SDGs. But it's not only about the actions at the international level. I believe that there's an important message for all of us today here that we can relay back to the country teams. So we should strive to designate more locally managed marine areas that focus on seagrasses. And we should make an effort to develop more national plans that explicitly include seagrass ecosystems. We also need to dedicate resources to build the capacity of people that work on the ground, either to map seagrass, either to determine the carbon storage capacity of seagrasses, and ultimately to contribute to the protection and the restoration activities that take place in those areas. And for this to happen, we need to go a step back, and we need to include all the stakeholders and take everybody on board, because we need countries to create these partnerships with scientists, with practitioners, with philanthropies, with the private sector. And we also need countries to strengthen this collaboration with other countries, because there is a unique opportunity to share achievements here and talk openly about what has worked well, what hasn't, because there's so many lessons that we can share so that we all, this can make us think outside of the box and beyond the silos. But the most crucial of all steps is to increase awareness. And I would like to give you the chance to watch today, if you haven't had a chance to watch it until this day, the historic moment when the World Seagrass Day, supported by Sri Lanka, was adopted in May of last year in the halls of the United Nations General Assembly. Please.
Dr. Maria, I think the sound is not there. You need to share the sound.
I was I can try to just share the sound. If I don't manage, just give me a sec. If I don't manage, I'm gonna send this all to you, because if you haven't watched it, you really need to watch this. I believe it's a historic moment for all of us celebrating here today, the World Seagrass Day. Let me check if I can. I don't think I can. Oh, it's such a shame. Well, I'm gonna just skip to the last slide I had, unfortunately. Just saying that, that I believe that, well, the UN World Seagrass Day will definitely bring the seagrasses further into our collective consciousness, and I hope it will galvanize support both from the public and the private sector to push for the protection and the restoration. And I would like to thank you again for your attention, and once again for this opportunity to give you an overview of the importance of seagrasses with a little bit of a focus on the climate regulation. For any further information, I have provided here the links to the World Seagrass Association website and also the Global Seagrass report that was published by the UN Environment Programme in 2020. I will stop here, but more than happy to take any questions today or offline, and here are my contact details. Thank you very much once again.
You want me to mute it?
Thank you, Dr. Maria, for that very elaborate presentation, done in a manner that even non-scientists and laypersons can understand the value of seagrasses, both the role that they play in balancing our ecosystem and the role that they play in mitigating climate change. As Ambassador Pires in his welcome remarks said, the very purpose of having a World Seagrass Day is to create that awareness. And you have certainly done justice to our efforts. And we also would like to take this opportunity to commend you for the work that you have done and the work that you continue to do in the field of environment. So we join hands with you, and thank you very much for your very elaborate presentation. Before I open the floor for comments that you may wish to make or questions that you may wish to pose to Dr. Maria, I'd like to mention the names of the 24 countries who joined hands with Sri Lanka in making this day a reality, and who gave us the strength to go forward. And I will just list out the names of the countries that joined hands with us. We had Bangladesh, Belarus, Bhutan, plurinational state of Bolivia, China, Costa Rica, Cuba, Guyana, Indonesia, Madagascar, Maldives, Nepal, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Panama, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Russian Federation, Senegal, Seychelles, Singapore, Timor-Leste, and Uganda. So thank you very much to all the co-sponsors who co-sponsored the resolution as well. Now I open the floor for any comments. Please raise the hand on your screen or put a comment on the chat box if you wish to speak, and we'll hand over the floor in the order that we receive the request. To begin, we have His Excellency Mohammed Al Hassan, the Ambassador of Oman, who has requested the floor. You have the floor, Excellency. Well, it's possible Ambassador of Oman would join us in a little while. Let me give the floor to...
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Ambassador. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I apologize, I'm in a car, but at least I can share and participate in this very important event through audio at least. The name of Oman did not appear on the list of countries who co-sponsored the resolution of the General Assembly. However, I would like to state here that you should consider Oman as one of the strongest and staunchest supporters of this movement, and allow me to call it a movement. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you colleagues. First, allow me to thank the Permanent Mission of Sri Lanka and Dr. Maria Portoroglu, for the invaluable efforts to raise global awareness on seagrass as we celebrate the first anniversary of the wide cross-regional support for the resolution establishing World Seagrass Day extends a clear message. Seagrass are vital everywhere, and we must increase awareness and conservation efforts everywhere. Seagrass are an important component of the ecosystem on our globe. As Dr. Portoroglu pointed out in her briefing, which I have listened and followed very attentively and carefully, they store up to 18% of total oceanic carbon and are vital to the survival of marine creatures and ecosystems. They're crucial allies to mitigate the impact of climate change. Seagrass are sources of life, oxygen, shelter, nutrition, and economic and social development for all species on Earth. Colleagues, as we strive towards the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, seagrass contributes to 16 out of the 17 SDGs. And yet, human activity remains the most common threat to 93% of seagrass species. Today, about a football field in seagrass is lost every 30 minutes. We have already lost over 20% of the global seagrass. Let this International Day not be an empty call, but rather an important reminder of our responsibility to protect vital marine biodiversity everywhere with concrete actions towards conservation. As we conclude our negotiations to establish a legally binding instrument on the conservation marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, or what we call PPNG, we must remember today's global call for the conservation of seagrass everywhere. In conclusion, I would like wholeheartedly to thank the organizers, the moderators, the speakers for this very important and historic moment marking the first anniversary of the World Seagrass Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for your warm words and for your words of support to Sri Lanka, as well as all the other co-sponsors, as well as the mentioning about the efforts that we take at the UN, including the ongoing BBNJ negotiations. Next, we have with us His Excellency, the Ambassador from Nigeria, His Excellency Mohammed Bande. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much indeed, my dear brother. But let me really thank my friend, the Ambassador of Sri Lanka, for his leadership on this matter and the mission itself. Certainly, you have worked hard to really show the importance of seagrass to us. And I think the expert who spoke made the case extremely clearly. And I think what's important is for us to continue to accord implementation high priority as we continue to get a lot of other colleagues to appreciate why seagrass is important in the context of SDGs. I have nothing much to say beyond what has been stated, but to commit to working with the mission of Sri Lanka and other colleagues to continue in this journey in terms of getting seagrass appreciated for what it does for all of us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much for your intervention. Next, we have here with us Ibrahim Suri, Deputy Permanent Representative of Maldives. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, my good friend. First of all, let me thank the PR of Sri Lanka and also the team for having this event. And of course, Dr. Maria, for that very comprehensive, but as mentioned by DPR of Sri Lanka, you have actually pointed out in a very simple language that, people like us who are not experts on this area can understand. I would just make a comment and perhaps ask one question. The comment would be about Maldives being one of those low-lying country and also affected by climate change, take this issue very seriously, and that's the reason we co-sponsored. And indeed, what I would like to say is our private sector tourist resorts actually have started a kind of movement. There are, I think now, several more than 30 resorts who have actually joined the campaign to protect the seagrasses in the areas surrounding the resorts, because there is sometimes this misunderstanding that seagrass can be a kind of a nuisance to the beauty of the lagoon and so on and so forth. However, as Dr. Mario has pointed out, it is a very, very important part of kind of work as a sink to absorb, carbon dioxide. And it because one of the issues more is, of course, deals with this coral issues impacting coral reefs. So this is one way, because of ocean acidification, of course. So this is one way of seagrass is one, as Dr. Mario pointed out, one way of kind of mitigating this. What I feel like is, I think this is the importance of this particular event, is that we need to talk more about, we often talk a lot about climate change issues related to mitigations, related to, focus on fossil fuel and so on and so forth. But in addition to that, of course, this is another area that we should perhaps talk more and make people aware. There are a number of means, different means to, deal with climate change measures in terms of mitigation. So that is why we of course, thank the government of Sri Lanka, the mission here, for, having this event. So my question would be that, is there a database? Because as I said, in the Maldives, we have this ongoing projects, which is run actually mostly by NGOs and private sector. But my question is there a database which they can have access on best practices and what is happening in other parts of the world? I'm sorry if I have missed the earlier part, whether you may have already discussed this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maldives, for your comment, and especially the comment regarding the need for a nexus between the tourist industry and the conservation movement, especially in a country depending on tourism, which is very much applicable to Sri Lanka as well. Let me hand over the floor now to Dr. Maria to answer the question, and then take another round of questions if you have any. Dr. Maria, you can answer the question about the database.
Yeah, and of course, and I think this was one of the main points that I raised, that it would be very nice if we had this open platform where we can share like experiences, not only like between scientists, that we usually do it like through publications and reports, but practitioners can do the same, like coastal managers, and countries can also do the same. I'm not aware of any platform dedicated to seagrasses per se, but there's other platforms that you can look and you can filter down by seagrass. One that comes on the top of mind is one that is called Panorama. That if you can go there, you can find several practices that have been shared in the platform that have worked in other places. They have talked openly within that platform about what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And they do offer some type of advice of how this could be replicated to other places. I can connect with you offline. I can give you more information on this. More recently, the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, the ocean panel as it's called, it's put on the public domain another platform where they share experiences on different areas, not necessarily only on the conservation or restoration of seagrasses, but other like ocean themes like blue economy, ocean finance, and so on, where this is destined for country-to-country exchange. And again, like I will be more than happy to direct you to those resources. So just a couple like on the top of my head, but I'm sure I could provide more offline.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. We have a question in the chat box. Dear Dr. Maria, what insights do we have regarding impacts of seafloor mining on future of seagrass? Would you like to answer that as well?
That's a very good question, if I could. Well, it depends on the depth of where we have these activities. If I'm not mistaken, usually seafloor mining happens in the deep. I mean, this is not to say that the shallow areas are not affected, and we do have areas where seagrasses can be found as deep as 70 meters. It depends if that is considered deep or not. Maybe like for seafloor mining activities, this is considered very shallow. But I'm on the top of my head again, I haven't come across any publications just looking at the effects of these very destructive activities on seagrass habitats, but everything that happens in the sea. But we do see it like with offshore energy platforms, they affect nearby ecosystems. The same happens on the land. Something you do on the coast or something like even like further away from the coast can have an impact on seagrasses. So yeah, again, sometimes distance doesn't mean anything, can be far away, but you can still see the effects on the seagrass ecosystems.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. Thank you for your reply. We have another comment request from Ms. Senali Mendis. You have the floor, madam.
Yes. So thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm Senali Mendis from Sri Lanka, and I have a humble request for all the participants. Since as I noticed, there are many participants from many countries in this platform. That is, when considering the future awareness programs and activities to conserve seagrasses, I would humbly request to include the children as much as possible, because even for me at this age, all these events that you all organized about seagrass was so enlightening. I learned so many things that I never knew. So I'm sure that awareness would play a key role in making sure that we protect these precious resource for the future. So my request is to include the children in the future for these efforts as well for awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanali, for your comment. It's very well taken. As you would perhaps know, the Ministry of Environment and the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Sri Lanka today had the World Seagrass Day commemorations, and children were very much a part and parcel of those celebrations. We also did play a video beginning with children, which was part of the commemoration that we did part of the commemoration that we did in New York. And we would, of course, hope to end today's presentation also with a video that will be played shortly. Thank you, but your comment is very well taken. Children are our future. They need to be they need to be educated on the importance of this vital ecosystem, and definitely we will take that into consideration in our future celebrations. Are there any more wishing to take the floor? Ms. Hasanti Disanayaka, our ambassador, the Sri Lankan ambassador in Turkey, Turkey, who incidentally was the Director General of the Ocean Affairs Division in the ministry, who took the lead in inspiring us to take this effort at the UN General Assembly. Ms. Hasanti Dissanayake, you have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Excellency, Dr. Mohan Peris and Deputy Sugishwara. Actually, I wish to take this opportunity to thank all of you in New York for taking this on and pursuing this. And I also must tell you, it's very important for especially those foreigners who have joined and people from the UN to know that this initiative actually came through an NGO in Sri Lanka. And it was driven by the work done by one particular person, Susantha Udagedara. He was the driving force behind it, coming from civil society, from an NGO, working with the Ministry of Environment, and then I met him. And then he was able to convince me, and I learned a lot about seagrass, just like the other lady from Sri Lanka told. I didn't even know the existence of seagrass in the first place until I met him. But working with him and his push has brought in, and I think it's a very good example where countries on many issues working together with not just the private sector and governments are working together in the developing world in a big way now, but also working with civil society. So this showcase how progressing that people can be to achieve common objectives, whether it's private sector, governments, or civil society. I would say in that sense, it's also a very good success story that we can talk about globally. And doing the part in New York, thank you so much for the New York UN team. And also there was other contributors from Sri Lankan side to get this on board from academic perspective. Professor Sewwa Wichakodi was one of them. And of course, in the Biodiversity Secretariat, Padma Bekon, and from the from Wildlife and Forest Conservation Ministry, Dayaman Ratnayaka, Manjula Amararatna, and then Nishanta Idrisinghe from Forest Department. They all contributed much for getting this on. I just wanted to mention their names and thank everybody for bringing this together. Thanks.
Thank you, Hasanti, for mentioning, especially Mr. Susantha Udagedara. I was about to mention, and Dr. Maria did also mention, it speaks volumes of what an idea conceived by one man, one committed individual can achieve in inspiring the environment around him, first the people around him. So much kudos goes to Susantha Udagedara. I think he had joined us for the initial part, but now he's not there. But I think we should all give him a round of applause if we can. But since we are meeting virtually, we are not able to do that. If there are no more interventions, sorry, I think there is Dr. Maria, you want to take the floor?
Just very briefly, I want to mention exactly what Madame Hasanti said. As seagrass scientists, like in the past, in order to raise awareness on seagrasses, we used to combine them with what we call the charismatic species, like dugongs and manatees. But I do believe there's another charismatic species, and this is like all of us. And I see, like from this example with Sri Lanka, like what Susantha did. I mean, he is a charismatic person. And all of you, I'm sure, like in your countries, you must have a seagrass champion. So just look out for them, because they will help you to understand the value of seagrasses, like in your own context and in your own countries. So yeah, just a round of applause for Susantha, really. All of this, it's because he started it.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. If there are no more interventions, let us end today's proceedings with the closing remarks by His Excellency Ambassador Mohan Peris. I'll hand over the floor to His Excellency, followed by a video presentation on seagrass. We hope today's commemorations in this forum and elsewhere in the world, including in Sri Lanka, has contributed to creating the necessary awareness of this vital ecosystem and its contribution to our very existence.
Unmuted.
I thank you all for being present with us and wish you the very best. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you for giving me the floor once again. I do not wish to, as they say, paint the gilded lily, because we have had a feast of knowledge this morning on this subject of seagrass and the preservation of the environment of the sea and the oceans through seagrass and how we address climate change. I can only perhaps, I would be remiss in my obligations if I was not to express my deep thanks to Madam Ligia Nerona from our UN office here in New York, to Dr. Maria Petroglou for giving us such a comprehensive, extensive, in-depth, but simple presentation of what the seagrass can do for us. And then, of course, we have Hasanti Disanayake, Ambassador, Her Excellency, in Turkey, who perhaps was the source of all this interest in the Foreign Ministry, for which we are deeply grateful. Then we have Susanta Udagedara, as Professor was pleased to observe, has played a pivotal role, and all in our missions and government departments who have, in small measures maybe, have contributed to sensitizing the whole world about the importance of seagrass. Now, and finally, I must thank my Deputy Ambassador Sugishwara Gunaratna for taking such great interest and spearheading this initiative, and the members of my mission who has spent a long time putting things together to make sure that this morning was going to be a success. And of course, His Excellencies, my colleagues here in New York, ambassadors who joined us to enrich this discussion. We have been nourished, so to speak, this morning with some intellectual input of a rare kind. And we thank all those facilitators for giving us that knowledge, in the hope that we can all get together in this initiative and make sure that the planet is going to be a safer place for all of us to live in. After all, we are almost 9 billion on the planet, and we are consuming the planet's resources at a rate that is much more, never envisaged in perhaps in all the scientific research that we have done. We do not have, as I said, another planet to go to, and this is our home. So let's today, the lesson that we have been left with is that these beautiful little creatures of nature is what we need to rely on, that we can safely rely on. So let's not destroy them. Let's preserve them for the next generation of our communities. Remember that we have an intergenerational trust that we will hand over a better planet to the next generation. And that's something that we should always keep in mind. And may I once again thank all of you for participating in this great event, from which we can walk away in the true knowledge that we are in safe hands with safe people who know the importance of climate change, its ramifications, and the need to combat that as effectively as we can. Thank you very much.
I love seagrass and I want to share my love with you. To me, seagrass is incredible. I think this for many reasons. Today, I would like to tell you why seagrass meadows and all the animals that live there are important to me.
Seagrass meadow is a marine ecosystem which contains billions of individual seagrass plants. This is seagrass.
Seagrasses provide valuable benefits for aquatic fauna and it acts as a carbon sink to mitigate climatic changes.
මුහුදු පැලෑටි කියන්නේ මුහුදු ජීවීන්ගේ ප්‍රධාන ආහාරයක් වගේම ඔවුන්ගේ ප්‍රධාන ඔක්සිජන් නිපැයුම් කරුය.
Deniz çayırların denizlerin akciğeridir. Deniz çayırları sudaki akıntıyı yavaşlatır. Seagrass beds are one of the most productive and beautiful ecosystems in the world. A lot of animals live there like fish, crabs, seahorses, and shrimp.
These are examples of creatures that live in seagrass meadows.
Seagrass also provides a habitat for rare and endangered species such as seahorses and stock jellyfish.
Seagrass are the favorite food of dugongs that live in shallow coastal waters in Sri Lanka. They are critically endangered mammals.
Why is there a lot of animals live there? It's because the seagrass beds create food and shelter.
While a tree produces 260 pounds of oxygen per year, 1 square meter of seagrasses produces over double this.
Through fisheries, marine tourism, and coastal protection from storms, people are benefited from them.
They provide many important services to people as well. But many seagrasses have been lost because of human activities.
ඔබ සමගයේ අර්ථකර ක්‍රියා නිසා අනාගතයේදී පුංචි අපිට මෙම ලස්සන වටිනා පරිසරය අහිමි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඔයාලා දන්නවද එක කුලකැස්බේවෙන් දවසකට කිලෝ 2ක් විතර මුහුදු තනකොළ ආහාරයට ගන්නවා. ඉතින් මුහුදු තනකොළ විනාශ වුණොත් මුහුදේ ඉන්න මාළුවෝ මැරුණොත් අනිකුත් සුන්දර සතුන් නැති වුණොත් මුළු මුහුදම අවලස්සන තැනක් වෙනවා. Seagrass meadows and all animals live there are members of the planet. They have a right to breathe, right to grow, right to live peacefully as same as me.
Us humans have been on Earth for 6 million years. What have we done in those 6 million years? Destroyed our own planet. Make a difference. Make the effort. Save our oceans. Save our seagrass.
So my friends, let's make our world more beautiful.
Thank you, everyone. Have a very nice day. Thank you for joining us today. All the best.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you.
joining us.